We're going to start with a quick look at our agenda. We're going to discuss the what and why on trends with modernizing IT operations. We'll take the discussion forward by introducing AIOps. We'll speak to some specific use cases, and then we'll come back around for a live demonstration and talk about some next steps. David and I thought it would be helpful to share our own personal experiences in the field of IT and software in regards to some of the challenges that we've faced. We can expect some of you all in the audience here to resonate with some of these challenges. For myself, I study computer science, and I've been in this space of IT and software development since 2007. Fast forward to today, as a developer advocate at AWS, one of my favorite aspects of the job is to make everyone's life better. And I'm hearing more and more that people can feel that this can be a 24/7 job. For my operations people, you have a responsibility to ensure high availability and operational excellence for your applications. And for my developers, perhaps you are the developer that built these applications. When anything goes wrong, you might be the first person called, or you're ultimately the one to have to figure out how to fix it. So I'll take a quick poll by show of hands. How many of you have been paged in the middle of the night or had to fix some kind of IT or software issue at an inconvenient time, like dinner with the family? Right, so a lot of us have experienced this burden, and I want you to reflect on that time for a moment. And if it's been many times, perhaps you can reflect on one of the worst. Did you know who to call? Or if you were the one to fix it, did you know what steps to take to solve it? And if you were in that position, did you find yourself going down a wrong path? Perhaps you spent 30 minutes or an hour. Meanwhile, the production system is down and there's a real business impact happening. And then you realize, uh-oh, I need to turn back around and start over. So we've all been here, and we've been hearing more and more from customers about this alarm fatigue, and that's just one of the many challenges we're seeing in IT operations. I'm going to pass it off to David to share his experiences as an SRE.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. So I'm curious, we talked about paging. What about just the content of said pages and the lack of information? And then the consequences of not having enough information when you get that page. And that's only going to increase your mean time to resolution. You're not going to be able to solve the issue quickly. And that's only going to further complicate things. And it's funny working in operations, because then we overcomplicate that by then creating more dashboards, more alarms. And then as a result, we then get overpaged. And then we get just the overabundance of that information. And then that's not helpful either. So I'm curious, talking about operation issues, how many people have actually been in a war room that's lasted over a couple of days? It's really hard to see any hands. What about a couple of weeks, a month? I personally can relate to being in a war room for over a month, and just that lack of information or the abundance of information directly affected that. But then what if you can actually correlate all that information back in a single pane of glass and actually, instead of while you're troubleshooting the issue, actually know what that root cause is, and then you're not actually doing a post-mortem, you actually know up front what's actually going on. And that's the power of an AIOps solution. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it back over to Jonathan, who's gonna be able to talk about IT operations currently.
So when we look at a traditional IT workflow today, you'll see on the left here, we have all these applications. And as we're seeing a shift more towards microservices-based architectures, these applications further are compounded into many microservices. And each of these apps or microservices are producing metrics, application log data. And for the case of microservices, you find yourself assessing trace data because you have customers coming in to an endpoint, and then it ultimately gets relayed back to some microservice down the line. And as you configure alarms and dashboards for all these apps and for all these metrics, that can be a heavy lift to configure, and it's all manual work. And imagine that you do this, and then the next day or the next week, your resources change. Perhaps you've added a new resource, or you've removed a resource, or maybe you've just got a new customer shift in traffic, and so your behavior is changing and you need to adjust thresholds dynamically. What about issues that you might not even be looking for? Combining that with your DevOps culture, maturing, the business acceleration demands, and agile software development, that can lead to additional gaps in coverage. Now back to this workflow, perhaps you have some kind of automated ticket and notification mechanism. Perhaps one of these alarm thresholds was breached. You have to determine, or some other human has to determine, was this really valid? Is this alarm valid, or is it a temporary hiccup? Or could it be to some kind of new shift in customer traffic pattern? What if you could use AI and add some additional intelligence to parse through all the noise and only surface the appropriate signals? Use AI to detect behavior that deviate from normal operating patterns so you can identify operational issues more intelligently, also known as AIOps for monitoring. In fact, IDC predicts that 70% of businesses will be using AI for their operations. I'm curious today, I'll take a quick poll of how many of all are using AIOps solutions today or have already explored some of that technology? Right on. And that's where AIOps comes in. With AIOps, you automatically can analyze your trends and set alarm thresholds dynamically, auto-detect issues you may not already be looking for, and differentiate that signal from noise, and even provide context to your operations team when they get notified of a potential issue. Let's take a look at what AWS has to offer that can help you automate without the need of creating and maintaining your own intelligence and models, helping you avoid the heavy burden and start thinking about how you can utilize a few services within AWS to easily start using AI for your IT operations. So how do we do this with AWS today? So on the bottom here, you're going to see some input signals. And because today's theme is serverless, I'll give a serverless Lambda function as an example. So say you turn on your Lambda function, and out of the box, you're going to have metrics that are referred to as CloudWatch vended metrics. So they're given to you by default. And these things can include number of invocations, errors, or latency. But you also might have some custom CloudWatch metrics as well, in addition to some of the different data, which could be your CloudTrail API calls, as pointing back to my reference to microservices, the X-ray trace data. In addition to, I can imagine some customers here might use relational databases and on the cloud, and you might be an RDS user today. And so perhaps you have performance insights enabled in RDS to help optimize your performance. And you set alarms and thresholds and dashboards for all these metrics and log data and visualization for 24/7 operations. But as you realize, scaling with this can be near impossible. And that's where we add an AI ML layer, Amazon DevOps Guru, a fully managed AI ops solution to augment your IT ops resources and surface that signal from the noise. DevOps Guru is fully managed, no machine learning skills required. The service continuously analyzes and consolidates streams of operational data from multiple sources, including some of which you see here, CloudWatch metrics, AWS CloudFormation, X-ray, and it provides you with a single console dashboard to search and visualize anomalies in your operational data. Using pre-trained models informed by years of experience from Amazon.com and AWS Operational Excellence, these models can identify anomalous application behavior, such as increased latency, resource constraints, and error rates, and surface those critical issues that could cause potential service disruptions or outages. I'm going to pass it off to David to talk about Amazon DevOps Guru and some use cases for how it could benefit operations.
Awesome, thank you. So what is Amazon DevOps Guru? As Jonathan was mentioning, it's an AIOps solution. We're going to take you through the console and show you how to enable it, but it is super easy to enable with a simple couple of clicks within the console itself. As far as auto-detecting your operation issues, imagine in your operation environment now and what you don't know is currently happening behind the scenes from an anomaly detection. At that point, it can help you with discovering issues you're not even aware of. As far as the quick resolution, the insight that it's providing covers 3 key metrics: the metrics themselves, the enrichment data, as well as the resolution, which then helps you get to that mean time to resolution so much faster. And as far as scaling, so in your current environments, when your developers release new features, and then at that point they're using new services, you have that current gap of coverage with your current observability. Well, what if they were already covered with this solution, and at that point you wouldn't need to worry? As far as reducing the noise, I mentioned as far as the insight that it's providing, it's rolling that up across multiple metrics. So you're going to be getting a page in that single pane of glass across multiple metrics to be able to provide you with that insight. So instead of getting 4 or 5 pages across different services when you have a production down issue, you're going to be getting a single page. Let's talk about a serverless use case. So in this particular use case, we have an API gateway that's tied to Lambda, as well as DynamoDB on the back end. And I talked about the enrichment data, so let's tie this back to a CloudFormation stack. And we just recently did a deployment, but our developer made a mistake, and he actually reduced the read capacity of the table in this hypothetical scenario. I realize we're only using 3 services, but imagine at a greater scale across multiple services. So in this scenario, we actually made a typo. The developer already deployed it, and at the same point, we're having an increased load on our API gateway. So we're taking a lot of traffic. As a result of the scale up, we're now getting errors on API gateway. Lambda is timing out, as well as from the read capacity, we're hitting errors there as well. So in a normal solution, you would get 3 different pages across the board. Now if we introduce AIOps, DevOps Guru, at that point, we're going to add that to the solution, and now we're going to be getting insight across those 3 services. So in this particular use case and this hypothetical scenario, you would get 1 page. It would tie those 3 metrics across the board, and then it would also show you that deployment that you had in CloudFormation, so you can tie that across the timeline of the events and correlate the 2 together, providing you a quicker mean time to resolution. So how does it work? So you have your AWS resources, and you can enable it in a couple of different fashions. You can tag your resources specifically with a DevOps Guru tag, hyphen, and then your own little phrase, and then tag the resources that way, and the service will pick them up. Or you can tie it to CloudFormation stacks, or you can enable it across all the resources, or across multiple accounts in an organization. At that point, as Jonathan was mentioning, we're taking in different inputs. We're looking for anomalies based on our machine learning, and we're looking across X-Ray, CloudTrail, RDS Performance Insights, as well as CloudWatch. From there, it's all getting funneled up into DevOps Guru. And I mentioned the deployment piece, so we're using that as enrichment data, and at that point, you can see when there's infrastructure changes or any sort of deploys. And then as far as the page, at that point, it's being delivered via an insight, and the insight has those 3 key components: the metrics, the enrichment data, and also the AWS recommendations, so that you can get to that resolution so much faster. As far as the delivery method for the insight, at that point it can be delivered via an SNS, and we're going to be posting through Ops Center integration, or you can also deliver through PagerDuty, as well as OpsGenie or other third parties. And at that point, you can get delivered to your operation folks or your developers, whoever's taking those pages. So I'm going to go ahead and cut over to a serverless demo. I talked about the use case with API Gateway, Lambda, and Dynamo. I have Jonathan unlock the screen. At that point, so the same use case that we just covered, I'm going to be talking about, and we're actually going to take a look at the insight that was generated from that hypothetical scenario. And again, I know we're just talking about 3 services, so imagine it across a larger stack. And at that point, it would only complicate things with the amount of services that you would need to dive into, the logs, and et cetera. So here from the insight perspective that was delivered, you can see the overview section where we have the start and end time. This one is currently closed out. It's not ongoing. Otherwise, it wouldn't have an end time. But then you can see the aggregated metrics below where we're actually tying in all the different services that were affected, as well as the metrics. To point out API gateway as well as Lambda here. And you can see the timeline event on the right. You can see me highlighting over here on how it affects the different services. You can also switch to the graphed anomalies. I personally like this a little better. I think it's a little more visually appealing. But then you can see how that corresponds with those same metrics. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and that's where we can then look at that relevant events. So we can see the deployment, and I can click on it and see that time frame on how it actually relates with the above timeline as well. So that you can correlate the deploy as a possible root cause. And then if we scroll down farther, this is where we actually see the recommendations in that single pane of glass that we talked about. You can see that we're actually recommending a rollback based on the change, as well as just standard troubleshooting with the services that were affected. At this point, go ahead and switch back to the deck. I'm going to also talk about another use case. I know it's not a serverless use case, but I want to talk about RDS and the insights that we're providing there in another solution. And the reason I want to bring this up is because with the DevOps Guru engineering team, as well as with the Performance Insight team, they worked hand in hand with providing insights that you don't have to be a DBA to understand. So you can actually dive into the insight that we just showed in a use case like that, and then understand in great detail without being a database engineer. Give me one moment. So we'll go over how to enable the service. Right now, we just wanted to get into like the weeds and not bore you with enabling it, because it is super easy. But it depends on how you enable it, if you're doing it across your particular stacks or tags. But we can also address that question at the end.
Really neat demo with the reactive insights there, David. What David just showed was the exact architecture use case that he was describing before, where you had the different resources all spinning alarms, and it's really neat to see how DevOps Guru can aggregate those metrics and provide the recommendation.
So as far as the RDS insight, it's awesome because it's not just providing you that guidance, but it's also then giving you information on how to solve the issue itself. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to this particular RDS anomaly, and just to paint the picture here. So in this particular use case, different from the previous serverless, we had a spike in our active number of connections, and at this point it had driven up the database load. So let's go ahead and dive in and see what's going on here. Clicking on the insight, and you can see here, again, the overview section, but then let's dive into the metrics themselves, and you can see here from Performance Insights, we're getting 2 different metrics, the connection sum, as well as just the database load, and you can see how one affects the other. So why did the average active connections actually drive up and spike our database? So I'm going to go ahead and click on the view analysis. And this is actually linking back to Performance Insights graphs. So then we can dive in and actually see what's going on. You can see the spike in average active connections over a period of time. It was pretty much close to 0 before, and then it's drove up the database load. And it looks like we're also having an issue with weights or locking on the database, so we have some contention there. Let's go ahead and look at the analysis, because this is where it's providing you that additional information on how you can actually solve this or what's actually going on. So I'm going to click here, and we can see the locking issue that I mentioned before. So apparently all these connections are actually active on one particular row on the database, causing said locking issue. And then I can actually click on the SQL statement itself, and it'll dive me in and show me the SQL statement, as well as, well, why is this a problem? Well, our average active connections was near 2, but it skyrocketed near 100. And at the same point, we're accessing the same row on the database. And as a result, or causing issues with the database load. Let's go ahead and go back to the deck. I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Jonathan, who's going to talk about some proactive insights, and he's going to go ahead and demo those features.
We'll switch back to the deck. Thank you. So we've gotten feedback from customers that we like these reactive insights, but we'd love to see more proactive insights from DevOps Guru. That way we can be aware of potential circumstances even before they happen. And today, we've launched some new proactives that I'll be demoing. But before I get into that demonstration, I wanted to just paint a story of how this could relate to a customer experience. So imagine we have Mother's Day coming up, and your business is an e-commerce site, and folks are coming to the site to buy items for Mother's Day. And you have a fully serverless e-commerce solution, and it's backed by Lambda. In particular, for your checkout of the cart, you have Lambda behind the scenes there. And so you've had issues in the past where you have spikes of traffic, and sometimes with Lambda, the traffic is intense, and you're having what we call cold starts with Lambda. And this can lead to a less desirable experience to your customers, because when that cold start is engaged, there could be some latency impact. Now, the customer is still okay, they can still purchase what they need, but of course you want the best possible checkout experience for your customer. And so because you've had these issues in the past, you've configured in Lambda what we call provision concurrency, or PC. And this allows you to have pre-warm Lambdas ready to go to accommodate such circumstances as spikes in traffic. And the benefit of that to your customer is that they're going to have a reduction in this risk of having that high latency experience. And so you can put an analogy to a storage disk. Imagine you have a disk and you're filling it up with data, and over time it'll get to a point, when sustained, and reach that breaking point where the disk is full. You can take that analogy to compute as well in this Lambda example. And in this case, we have DevOps Guru, your fully managed AIOps solution, seeing these operational metrics come in, and then proactively letting you know there might be a problem in the future if this behavior sustains. So we'll flip over to our console, and we'll take a look at what the proactive insight could look like. So as you see here, we're on the Amazon DevOps Guru page. And on the left, we can see here our dashboard, as well as underneath the dashboard, a direct link to the various insights that are going on. Now, the dashboard's showing you your system health overview. As David mentioned with the CloudFormation stack boundaries here, you can see different information about the various stacks that are running. And in this case, we have some unhealthy ones we might want to investigate. I'm going to go ahead and click on our insights from the left. And you'll see here what David had showed was this reactive section. But I'm pivoting over to the proactive here, and we can see our list of proactive insights. And so I have an example where we have this provision concurrency. You have your e-commerce site, the Mother's Day traffic is coming up, is being generated, and you're spilling over. What you have provisioned in terms of provision concurrency is exceeding what you have provisioned, and it's called provision concurrency spillover. So you can see this is indicating that this is an ongoing insight. And as I scroll to the right, we can see that it was created recently. It's affecting one application. And as you see here, in this case, it's only considered a low severity issue. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that insight, and it's going to take us right to the insight page. And we can see kind of a quick summary of, hey, we've assessed this particular metric, the provision concurrency spillover, and we're seeing some anomalous behavior. And so as you scroll down, you can see the Lambda concurrency spillover metric, and you can put your mouse over this graph and see that every minute here, there's a lot of spillage going on in this case. So we're going to scroll down. It's providing you more context that this is indeed a Lambda function, the particular resource that's affected. It's going to provide you with the actual application that it's grouped in. And then we can scroll down, and this is where we have that enrichment data. So in this case, we have our deployment history. So you have that context of, at this time, we deployed this change, and then sometime after, we might have this behavior. And then we scroll down to what you really want to know. Like, what do I do about this? And DevOps Guru here has proactively made you aware that based on your usage, we're going to recommend you adjust that provision concurrency and provide a reason for why DevOps Guru is making that recommendation. And if you scroll over to the left under the recommendations, DevOps Guru is providing you with a handy link where you can actually click right on the Lambda, and it will take you right there. So this will provide you context to what actual resource is affected in this case. As well, above the recommendation in the recommendation summary section, you have a link to the documentation. So you can navigate right there and bringing you that information you need and to be able to make those actions. Awesome. So that is our provisioned concurrency proactive use case. I'd love to share another example here. So we're going to go back to our insights page. And for this one, it's a little different. We've been talking a lot about how this AIOps solution can help improve your availability, your application's availability, as well as improve your operational excellence. And this is great. That's very important. But what about a different side of it? What else can DevOps Guru do with this AIOps solution? You can actually have DevOps Guru proactively let you know that, hey, you don't have any availability issues right now, but you actually have some capacity that you're not using. And so you're spending this money to provision the DynamoDB capacity, and it turns out that the metric is showing you're not using that at all. So DevOps Guru can, in addition to help you improve your availability and reduce mean time to resolution, it can also proactively let you know, in this case, that you might be spending more money than you need to be. So we'll take a quick look at that example. I'm going to go to the next page here, and we're going to click on this specific DynamoDB table rights, another serverless example. And we see on this one, it's providing us with one aggregated metric in this case, which is the low concurrency usage, and providing you with one recommendation accordingly. So similar to the provision concurrency with Lambda, this is with DynamoDB, our NoSQL database, and it's letting you know, hey, you probably, I'm seeing this data of, it's been one write capacity. So you've provisioned more, perhaps you might consider reducing that down based on your operational patterns that the solution is seeing. So we can scroll down here, and we see our recommendation summary, which again, providing you with a link right to the documentation to make it easy to address this issue. And similarly, in the recommendation section, we have the recommended change as well as justification for why this is being recommended. And again, very conveniently linking you directly to that DynamoDB resource. So here we're going to take a quick look at navigating that DynamoDB resource and seeing how you, when you face such a problem, and this AIOps solution has directed you to the solution, how you could go ahead and solve it. So from the DynamoDB page for this particular table that has been proactively generating an insight, we're going to go to our actions for the table and click on Edit Capacity. So as you see, we've already configured this for provision capacity, but it's a little bit underutilized. And for our write capacity here, you can see the estimated cost is $2.91 per month. Now that might not seem like a lot, but I'm sure some of you and David and I can speak to our own experience seeing customers with many tables, thousands of DynamoDB tables. And so this is just a simple example to kind of show you what this can do, but you can imagine how this couple dollars could potentially add up to a lot of money. And so take a look at that $291, and I'm gonna go ahead and change this per the AIOps solutions recommendation and make this 2. And you can see how right away it's telling you you've already almost, in essence, cut your costs in half. So that's a quick way to be able to follow these aggregated metrics, follow the prescribed recommendations, and then make that change, which in this case is going to help with your business in terms of potentially reducing some spend that's unnecessary. So with that, we'll want to show you how you could actually get started with this service. I'm going to go ahead and, for the purposes of this demonstration, navigate to a region that doesn't have the service enabled yet. So I could walk you through how you could go ahead and get started with a fully managed AIOps solution.
And this is where we'll answer your question. So his question, just so everyone's aware, was when I was talking about the RDS piece, was do you have to specifically enable it for that resource? Does that sum that up right? Awesome. So Jonathan will talk about the different ways to enable the coverage across tags, CloudFormation, or the region, or across accounts.
Awesome. So this is the landing page you'll see if you are first using this solution. And there's a quick and convenient get started button you can click on. And it's going to provide you with a quick summary, much of which we've already covered today. And then as you scroll down, it's, as David mentioned, this is where you can configure your analysis coverage. So by default in this wizard, we see it's going to analyze all of your resources across this particular region. You can also configure this solution to monitor specific CloudFormation stacks or bound applications by tags. We got a lot of customer feedback that we'd love to have this grouping because it helps us better understand our insights. And we have customers using CloudFormation that have found it beneficial to be able to aggregate the stacks when looking for anomalous behavior. But say you're not using CloudFormation today, you can alternatively configure AWS tags as your application boundary. Additionally, we want to meet the developers and the operations people where they are. So the purpose of this AIOps solution is not to be monitoring a dashboard. It's not to be keeping it up on a TV in the room all the time. It's intended to let you know, read through the noise, and then surface what's important when it matters to you. And so customers will configure SNS, or simple notification service. And this was part of David's architecture diagram in a previous slide, where he suggested customers not only do they use AWS Systems Manager Ops Center to generate ops item IDs, but perhaps you're using PagerDuty for your notification, or Atlassian Ops Genie. So this is a mechanism for you to be alerted and bring to surface that anomalous behavior without you having to be monitoring it all the time. So once you click enable, as David had mentioned, the tool does require some baseline period. So it is backed by machine learning, and it can take some hours, up to 48 hours, to kind of get this established baseline of what your operations normalcy look like. So that's how to get enabled. I kind of wanted to show you what it would look like to make some changes. So we talked about the dashboard. We went over some insights. But let's say you want to change how your resources are analyzed. Let's say you had it configured for all resources, and now you want to, you've adopted CloudFormation, and you'd love to aggregate your application in a grouping. So under the Settings tab here, we can go to Analyze Resources. And right now, it's currently set to analyze all resources. And so we'll hit Edit here. And you can see the different options. So even after you've turned on this solution, you can go back later, as in the example of, hey, now we're using CloudFormation. So in this case, we would click the CloudFormation stacks button. It's going to automatically pull in all of your stacks that are available. In this case, we have 70, but customers I've seen could have hundreds of different CloudFormation stacks. And I'm going to go ahead and just filter in here to show you how you can kind of, depending on your different naming schemes and that sort of thing, you could easily address or group the ones you want and click on this selection button to select all those that you have found. So that's a little bit about getting started. And I'm going to, we're going to go back to the slides and talk about some next steps.
So as far as what's next, one, we want to identify a critical workload. And the reason that I say that, you could imagine the machine learning in your QA environment. Unless you have a very sophisticated QA environment that's replicating your production environment, you're not going to get many insights in that environment. I'm not necessarily saying you should jump directly to production. Obviously, test it out. But at the same point, I want to set the expectations. Unless you have that sophisticated QA environment, it's not going to be generating the insights that it would within a production environment that actually had anomalies. So as far as enabling the service, we walked you through how to enable it. It's super easy, just a couple of clicks, depending on your configuration. And then there is the baseline period, which can take 24 to 48 hours, and that has to do with the machine learning. As far as viewing the insights, at that point, you'd be able to sit back and see if there's anything that you actually don't know about in your operation environment. And at that point, it would be able to provide you with the AWS recommendations so that you can move forward. I want to mention that we have a immersion day as far as a hands-on workshop that's going to be happening on May 10th. And you can register via the QR code that's on the screen there. Simply scan it. And at that point, we're going to be talking about the reactive insights as well as proactive with an interactive demo. So hopefully I see you there. And again, we're both super excited to talk to you today. We want to address your questions, so we're going to come down off stage. We'll be in the back of the room. You have our contact information on the board. Feel free to reach out to us. We are available. And at the same point, thank you for attending today.
Thank you. Yeah, we love hearing feedback from customers, so we look forward to any questions you have. We'll be around. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here at the summit to speak with you all. Thank you very much for joining us today.